Fearless Tips and Talks, you will find wisdom and strength to overcome fear and anxiety in a world that feeds it.
Fear and anxiety doesn't pick sides. We all experience it in different ways. In Fearless Talks, I'll introduce you to humble men and women who battled fear and were better off because of it. Join us every other Thursday to learn from these powerful interviews. Today we are gearing up for a brand new series called the Fearless Breakthrough Series. And this is going to run through the summer. And my guest today is 19 years old. And she has dealt with hellish anxiety, like on the bathroom floor, can't leave her bedroom, which is so similar to the story that I have as well. So Faith McDonald is a dear friend of mine. And I believe today, starting this Fearless Breakthrough series with her is going to give you so much hope and so much encouragement. Do not look at her as someone that is 19 and doesn't have wisdom, because wisdom pours from her. There are things that she said in the interview today that I need to learn, that I need to do better. So it is my joy and my honor to introduce to you today, Faith McDonald, one of the most amazing, spectacular, anointed, and incredible women of God I have ever had the chance to work alongside. So I hope that you enjoy this Fearless Talk today. Faith McDonald, welcome to Fearless Tips and Talks. We are going to have a talk today. It's going to be a authentic, just full of experience and trials, tribulations, ups and downs. So grateful for you. Before we get into the meat of this podcast, I'd really just like to know, people are going to be looking maybe on YouTube, or they're going to be hearing your voice and they're going to be like, how old is this girl, right? So give us a little background. Who are you? What do you love? What is your age? And then we'll get started.
Okay, so my name is Faith McDonald and I'm 19. I'm a student at Missouri right now, but I'm online because I love my family and I just wanted to spend some time with them. Quite honestly, I was just telling Christy, I'm an Enneagram 7, so anything that has to do with new adventures, new fun, new businesses, like that's me, which is super interesting when you compare that like with anxiety and how like it doesn't discriminate. Mm-hmm. And so I think that anxiety has never been a huge issue in my life until I was about 15. And I got really, really sick on a mission trip and I came back and it didn't just stay in Guatemala. I came back and was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, and with that, there was a lot of like physical dependence on the people around me because I was so sick, which led to a lot of anxiety as I was getting better of like, why don't I feel normal yet? Like if I'm physically recovering, like, why don't I feel normal? And a lot of fear because I saw how fastly things could change for the worse. And so I think fear and anxiety definitely began to like take root in the things can change for the worse very quickly. So always expect the worst. And so, when that came to relationships, when it came to friendships, when it came to school or careers, just looking at things and going, well, this is good right now, but it can change for the worst in 24 hours. And so that like thought and those lies definitely took root about in high school. And so it's been really cool to like look back and see what God's done with that and how he's redeemed it, but also looking forward to being like, this fight is something that we don't just like say it's closed and it's done, but the Lord redeems it every day. And so it's been, yeah.
That's a beautiful intro. So Faith, you have always held just a very special place in my heart. You have come to a lot of the Fearless events. I've seen you around. You're an incredible anointed worship leader. You are a faithful follower of Jesus, and you're a beautiful woman of God that a lot of people look up to. But recently, I received a call from your mom, and she's just like, hey, she knows that I speak out about fear and anxiety. And she's like, look, Faith's not doing well. And we're thinking about sending her somewhere because she's at a space from a psychiatric standpoint where she's not okay. And so this has only just been a few months that you and I have kind of reconnected and worked together. So what would you like to tell somebody that's listening to right now that is experiencing a severe amount of anxiety that might be hearing me say that now and go, but how is she sitting there now? Like what turned around? What changed her so rapidly?
Well, I don't think it was any one thing. I think when it comes to anxiety, there's a lot of components. And I think you talk about this in your book is like, there's three sides, like spiritual, emotional, and physical. And so even though like I was walking with the Lord emotionally, I was not doing well physically. I was not doing well. And so the moment that I addressed all of those and didn't just like, be like, okay, well, we're walking with the Lord, like, and God's like, but you're not drinking water. You should do that. That kind of thing is like, I think being able to look at things holistically and view all three of those really, really helped me. And then also, I'm a learner. I'm in school for psychology, and then I have a certificate working on it in neuroscience, and I love understanding the brain. And so I knew all the knowledge. Like, I could quote you front and back on what anxiety and depression is, but I didn't want to speak. I could like take in the information, but the last thing I wanted to do is expel information about why it was affecting me.
Wow.
Because of like, I'm a currently recovering perfectionist and overachiever. So to admit weakness was a huge thing for me. And so until like 3 months ago when we were meeting and I was like, Christy, like, I'm going to have to go to inpatient for months. Like we had been looking at a place in Florida and I was just going to go down there indefinitely until I was better. And you just encouraged me to journal and stuff. And I was like, wait, no. That means I have to admit weakness, and I don't want to do that. But when I started doing that, I realized like what God can do with that weakness and that he's not limited by my humanity and by my anxiety. And so that was really healing for me, is to, instead of just like intaking information, going the step further of like, how does this information apply to me? Why do I have fear and anxiety? Like, what is going on? What triggered this? And then what does the Lord say about this and how do I fix it? You know, instead of just intaking. So I think that was the huge like moment that it switched.
You know, part of the series, it's called the Breakthrough Series, is we wanted to interview different people from all stages of life. And I think there is something remarkable about sitting with a 19-year-old right now and learning from you, and how much we could be learning from you right now. And the fact, this generation is an intake generation. I mean, you are getting spammed constantly with TikToks and Reels and all kinds of things, right? And so to just have this moment right now where you just said, I was intaking, but I really wasn't doing anything with that information, right? So was there a knowledge paralysis that was taking place?
Yeah, I think so. Like almost like a knowledge guilt, because I have led worship at Fearless events. I volunteered with people, just leading small groups and walking with people through anxiety. And then also like majoring in health science and knowing the psychology behind it, like going to classes, like doing all these things. And it's this knowledge guilt of I know everything. I can help people. Why can't I help myself? And so I think because we live in a highlight reels generation of like Instagram and TikTok, where you're seeing like all these wonderful things, we're like, okay, so they're using all their pain to help other people. That's wonderful. But like, I wasn't even addressing my own. So I was like projecting all the help that I should have been like reflecting inward. Like, I need to work through this by myself before I become a life raft for somebody else. And so I think it was like knowledge guilt of like, I know all this, but to admit that I am struggling with this felt wrong because I hadn't been through something crazy hard. I hadn't like lost a parent or, you know, been through something traumatic. So I don't have a right to have anxiety. And so I think in such an intake generation, you intake the information and you want to like show what you know and help other people. But you can't help other people until you're well yourself.
You know, you just hit a point that I think people need to stop, re-listen again, because it's comparing each other's anxiety. Well, I haven't lost a loved one, or I haven't done this. So then that means that I don't have the right to have anxiety.
Exactly.
But when we peel back the onion and we look at, you've already mentioned a few things just in the first 8 minutes of this, that you deal with perfectionism and you deal with overachieving and striving and those sorts of things. So that leads me to my next question. You deal a lot with youth and ministry and leadership and ministry. How are you seeing, besides what you're dealing with, how are you seeing anxiety just run rampant in this next generation?
Oh my gosh. I think it's just like infiltrated the church because you're seeing these Christian influencers, which is beautiful, that they're sharing the gospel, but they're not sharing the hard things of life. And so I think you look at people I'm not going to name names of influencers, but they'll post all these things like in a coffee shop reading my Bible, but you have no idea what they're going through. And so you'll see like these youth going to these conferences and getting spoken to at huge, huge conferences by people who aren't actually sharing like vulnerable things. And so they're like, am I a good Christian if I'm struggling? And so, and this isn't something that I've seen in my own church, but more on like the large scale church thing is like you see social media and things like that playing into, the Lord is so good today. And he is, but it's also like the Lord is good even when things are hard. And I think we miss that step a lot of times. And so when I talk to people and I talk to my friends, it's just like, wow, like look what they're doing, all this stuff. And it's like, we have no idea. We've never met these people before. And so it's this unrealistic standard of like the coffee shop Christian girl kind of thing. I feel like that is creating this.
It's a filtered Christianity.
It's a filtered Christianity, absolutely.
Wow.
And so trying to make your lowlights be their highlights is like, oh, 100% of the time I need to be 100%, which is not what God has called us to be. I mean, we were just talking about at church how he said it's going to be easier for the prostitutes and the tax collectors to enter the kingdom of heaven than the Pharisees. And so I think you're going to have a lot of anxiety when you're trying to live a life convincing everybody that you're perfect. When as Christians, our job is to convince everybody that Jesus is perfect, not convince them, but like share that Jesus is perfect. We're imperfect. And that's what's the beauty of a relationship with the Lord. And so, when I talk to people, it's a lot of anxiety of like, am I not good enough? Am I doing something wrong that I'm not living this life that's like picture perfect?
And that's what social media is doing to people. It's curating things, making everyone see the highlight reels. And so therefore, when you do have a breakdown or you do get into a space where you've been the last 6 months, I can't share this. I can't tell people this. I can't. So how does that lead into decision paralysis? What does that look like?
I think for the first time in history, our generation sees the highlights of the what ifs decision. So for me, I was thinking about going to work at Life Church out of high school as a worship leader, intern kind of thing. And so I followed them and did all this stuff. And through like a lot of prayer and stuff, I decided to go to Mizzou, which I hated. I hated Mizzou. I was miserable. I was lonely. I lived on a co-ed floor, so I constantly felt unsafe. I was trying to navigate how to deal with the relationship while also maintaining independence and making friends. But also he was the only person that I knew at school really that I had a relationship with. So not being codependent and all this stuff. And so I was looking at these videos of Life Church and their worship leaders. And as I'm at Mizzou and miserable, and I'm comparing my lowlights to the highlights of what could have happened. Whereas like when you were going to college, if you sat down and talked to your friend on Christmas break or something like that, they would share, hey, I'm really struggling. I don't really love it. And you'd have a real conversation and that's how you'd know about their life. Whereas we see the highlights of the what ifs instead of the lowlights. So I don't know if Life Church would have been good for me, but I saw all the highlights. And so I saw my friends that went to Christian colleges who were loving it. They were going to worship nights, all these beautiful things. And they were posting about it. And I was like, that could have been me. Like I could have been having so much fun, but I chose the secular school and I'm miserable here. And so no matter what decision you make, I feel like our generation can always feel like it's the wrong one because you're seeing the highlights of the what ifs.
Wow, that's powerful. So what piece of advice would you give someone that's seeing all of those what if highlights? How did you become peaceful with your decision to go to Mizzou?
I think realizing that God factored my humanity into my decision process. So I think for so long, this is an idea that I had come to, not by people around me, but just in my perfectionistic nature of like, I'm supposed to read God's mind and what I'm supposed to do. Like he has this absolutely like thin line of things that I'm supposed to do. And if I step outside of that, then he's gonna be mad at me. Things are gonna go wrong. I'm not gonna share the gospel. Whereas like God has given us like guardrails and that's like his word and the way he's told us to live. And so realizing that if I went to Mizzou, there were lost people that would hear the gospel. If I went to Life Church, there were lost people that would hear the gospel. If I went to SBU, there are lost people who are going to hear the gospel. And as long as I'm living a life within the guardrails of his word and his mission, which is to share the gospel with unbelievers and build up and edify the believers in the church, then God does not need me to read his mind and figure out whether I'm supposed to go to Starbucks or another coffee shop. You know what I mean? And I think realizing that God can use me where I'm at. And I look at Jonah and the story of Jonah, and he ends up on this ship. He ran as far away from God as he could, but an entire ship of people became to know the Lord and were like, oh my gosh, this God is real because of Jonah's mistakes. And I'm not saying run from the Lord. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying don't become so terrified of making the wrong decision and like deciding on where to go to college or whether to take a job or not. Obviously be prayerful with it. But sometimes God gives us guardrails and says, go for it if you'd like. But if not, I'll use you wherever you go, because if your heart's to honor me, that's what I need. I don't need you to read my mind and figure out which college to go to.
That's so powerful, Faith, and such wisdom at 19 years old. It's so good. So you talked about these guardrails and truth. I think that your generation is really struggling to find an absolute truth. So how do you stand on truth where the whole world, especially people your age and younger, are saying, girl, just live your truth?
Dude, this is so something that I feel like Mizzou is really like forced me to be uncomfortable and having these conversations, because I would be in philosophy classes and they would talk about truth, but at the same time they'd tell us like there is no truth, you know? And so it's like coming out of both sides of their mouth. And I think if you're a believer listening to this podcast, it's not filtering your truth through what the Bible says and trying to find something to like support your truth. It's looking at the Bible and saying, what does the Bible say? And that is my truth. Like, it's not about my agenda and using the Bible to support it. It's about the Bible being what I believe and being my truth. And so
it's either true or not true.
It's either true or not true. There is no, it's true for you and it's not true for me. Like, that doesn't work.
That's good.
So I think as a Christian, yeah.
So I'm sure that this created rifts in maybe friendships or people that you were getting to know or working alongside at Mizzou. But talk to me about navigating friendships. Talk to me about what it looked like for you to be someone that does struggle with anxiety, and how did you communicate to people on what you needed? Just give me all advice on how to navigate friendships when you're dealing with anxiety.
I'm still figuring this out because I just went on a spring break trip for like 9 days with my best friends. And if you struggle with anxiety, which if you're listening to this podcast, you probably do, trips can be hard, especially with friends, because you don't just get to go home and break down or have like this like moment of like, like I'm crying, I'm terrified, I have no idea what's going on, like all the things, like I had a bad day. You're still with them at the end of the day, you know? And so navigating friendships is something I'm still figuring out. It was really, really interesting. So I just had a really, really bad day. And one thing about anxiety for me is I hear things people never said. So
wow,
my boyfriend looked at me and was like, hey, it's 9 o'clock. Like, that drink has caffeine and sugar in it. Like, do you think that's a good idea? And I was like, you're going to tell me what to drink? I got so mad. He's like, whoa. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just making you aware that like, hey, like caffeine doesn't like work well with you and anxiety. Like, I just wanted to bring that up so you knew and you didn't feel like I was just like ignoring something that could harm you. And I just got so upset. I was like, you're telling me what to do, like, and big deal over nothing. But with that, my friends were there and they were like, Faith, like, what is happening? And I was like, I'm so upset, like all this stuff. And they're like, I get it why you're upset, but let's talk about this. And instead of just like being able to go in like recluse and just be angry and hold on to anger and resentment because he told me it had caffeine in it, like stated a blatant fact. I now had to be vulnerable and honest with them. And they looked at me and they're like, he was looking out for you, Faith. And I think it's really, really hard as a Christian to have somebody look at you when you think you have like this righteous anger of like, you can't tell me what to do, like you're all this stuff. And to have friends look at you and be like, no, he's not telling you what to do. He's looking out for you and that kind of thing. And so letting people in is really hard for me. And so, but with that, they were able to encourage me and edify me and just edify. Let's not use church words. Like, they were able to look at me straight and be like, let's have a conversation about this. And we're going to talk through why you got so upset, all this stuff. And so it's really good, but it's also really hard to navigate friendships with anxiety.
So I think sometimes we think friends just like have your back no matter what. And, you know, in that moment, they'd be like, yeah, he was a jerk. I can't believe he said that to you. Da-da-da-da-da. But what you're saying is, no, actually a good friend is going to say, whoa, Faith, you were weird right there. Like, we need to work through that. And a good friend is going to hold you accountable. A good friend is going to look at you and be like, hey, that was a little weird and we need to work through this, right?
Yeah.
So what about the friends that when you're in the panic, when you're in the anxiety, how do you tell them to love you well in those situations? Or how do you communicate to them that you need space? What when you're in the middle of a panic, or just even the last 6 months that you've been through, how did you communicate to your friends?
A lot of text messages. I would say like face-to-face conversations are really hard. And so I'd be like, okay, yeah, I'm really struggling. Can I just text you really quick? Like if we weren't together, like I wasn't a phone call person really, because I could formulate my thoughts. And so a lot of text messages, honestly. And a lot of, I would start with, can I just dump? Like, don't hold this against, like, don't hold what I'm saying as truth. Hold it as these are my feelings. And being able to decipher that as like, I feel worthless. I feel like my life is going nowhere. I don't want to be here anymore. Here's what I'm doing to fix that. Don't feel like you need to fix that, but know where I'm at and know why I am not being a present friend for you. This is where I'm at. These are my feelings, and this is not truth. And so allowing them to know that, like, also it's not their fault. And I think a lot of my friends are like, what could we have done different? Even when like you come to like parents, or parents like, what did we do wrong, dude? Like, being able to just communicate, this is not your fault. There's nothing you can fix, but here's my honest, vulnerable, where I'm at, and these are my feelings. And dumping that, not expecting them to fix it for you, because that's my job and the Lord's job, and to help me work through this. But just to be honest, and I don't know, I know my friends were capable to handle it because they had struggled with it as well and struggled with fear and anxiety. But I think it's really important to gauge the people that you let into your darkest moments. I would say 3 girls that truly know what I'm going through when I'm going through it. And so you can let people know what you have been going through, but it's important that you know who is trustworthy when you're going through it, you know?
Well, I think something that you just said that is so powerful is understanding truth versus feelings. Mm-hmm. And so to have the wisdom to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling right now. It isn't truth, but I need you to know my feelings. Yeah. And I think that is, and not everybody can handle that. Not everybody can handle that.
Yeah. Yeah. And dumping it on people and expecting them to fix it is not the answer, but communicating with people and knowing that they will understand is incredibly helpful.
I feel like friendships with anxiety has been one of the biggest things that I have had to learn to truly navigate and navigate well. And I just want to recap, because you've said some brilliant things, to make sure that your friends know that your feelings aren't the same thing as truth, which I think is really important, to give you space to just get out those feelings and to not dump it on them and expect them to do anything about it. That ultimately the anxiety and fear that you're facing is something that you have to work on with the Lord. Now, your friends can come alongside you. They can love you. They can encourage you. They can pray for you.
Absolutely.
What do you feel like, you mentioned 3 friends. What do you think those girls did, or even Carlos, your boyfriend, have done what are the top 3 things that they have done that have helped you? Because there's somebody listening on the other side that's just tuning into this because they don't deal with anxiety, but they have a whole bunch of friends that do, and they're over it. They're so over it. So what would be the advice you're giving to a friend that doesn't get it and doesn't understand? What do you need the most? Top 3 things.
They're not scared of my fear. They can be scared of the effects of my fear. Like when I don't want to be alive, and I've sat down with them and been like, hey, I'm probably going to go to Florida for 45 days because I don't want to be here anymore. I'm tired of throwing up my food for the last 2 months. I'm tired of having panic attacks, and I haven't been off the bathroom floor, truly, when I've been home for 2 months. I don't want to be here anymore. They can be scared of the effects of that. They can be scared of losing me, but they're not scared of my fear. They can combat that with me and be like, well, we're just going to pray. They're not scared to sit and listen. And so I think with that comes all of them said, well, we'll be here when you get back. We're so excited to see you when we get back.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love. And I think with the not being scared of my fears, they didn't see me as my fear. And I saw myself as my anxiety, because I think when you're performance driven, because I'm graduating in 2.5 years with my bachelor's, I worked really, really hard for that. I was on an accelerated program and was just taking way too many classes. I saw myself as my achievements. So when failures happen, I also saw myself as my failures. And when they reassured me, I was talking to Carlos the other day, don't even remember how this came about, but we were just talking, and it was to the extent of like, I just feel like I'm such a burden. And he was like, you have a burden. You are not a burden. And that was like, oh, okay, yes, that's true. And that had been told to me so many times, but it just clicked the other day in reassuring you that you're not scared of your fear. You are not your fear. So I think a lot of reassurance, which can be exhausting on their end. I think if you're listening to this and you are the support system for someone with anxiety, it's not like the stomach flu where it gets better immediately and then it never comes back. It can be like a marathon that you have to run with them. And so don't feel like you're a bad person if you're tired. It's okay to rest, but also reassure them, I love you, but I'm going to go rest for a little bit. How about you rely on this person for a little bit? And that, I think, in marriage might be a little different, but in friendships and things like that, I think it's okay to be like, hey, Faith, like, you're really, really struggling today. Have you talked to your mom about this? Have you talked to your counselor about this? And also just like referring you to professionals. And I think that was one of the hugest things is like when people in my life were like, hey, it's okay to go see a psychiatrist. It's okay to look at inpatient. It's okay to go to Centerpoint. It is okay, because the best way that I can help you is to point you to people who can help you. Because as somebody listening who is the support system, if you are not a psychiatrist, you are not a counselor, you have not struggled with anxiety, you can only reassure and love. But that will get you to the point where you can tell them, I love you enough to send you on to somebody else, and I will be right here when you get back, you know? And so I think that was really huge for me, is when everybody in my life sat down and said, we will love you while you're there. We will write you letters, but we have done everything that we can here, you know?
That's such great advice. So Faith, you and I are doing something kind of cool right now. We're going through the Breakthrough book together and kind of talking through some aha moments and things like that. What are some things that have been maybe your breakthrough moments through reading the book?
It asked me questions, which is really hard for me. I told you. So we were meeting about every week, every other week, twice a month. And I showed up the first time and I was like, Christy, I was not able to answer the questions. I like looked at the book and I was like, I can't do this. Like, you want me to record my weakness? Like, you want documentation?
And we had to figure that out, didn't we, Faith?
Figure it out, because I was like, I refuse to acknowledge weakness. And not only did I want to not acknowledge my own weaknesses, it was so hard for me to acknowledge other people's weaknesses. And as I was going through the book, and it was like, what is the biggest setback in your life? Like, what is something that's really a big trigger for you? I realized that I think one of the hugest breakthroughs for me, and we haven't even talked about this yet, but I equate others' failures with my ability to support their success.
Wow.
So when other people around me fail, I get anxious because I didn't do a good job supporting their success. There's something I could have done. I could have strived. I could have like helped them with, so they could have succeeded. Even if they're like 3 circles removed from me and I see that they are struggling with anxiety, depression, those things, I'm like, what did I do wrong to where I couldn't be a support system to help them? But on the other side of this, we literally just said, my support system can't fix this for me. So where's the disconnect in that, you know? And so I think one of the hugest breakthroughs for me was realizing how, number one, I don't want to admit my weakness. And this book asks you questions in the back, which is so cool to me. And number two, I take everything as my weakness. Everybody else's weakness is mine as well.
You know, I've heard this kind of taught before, that anxiety is very I-focused. It makes us put everything back on us. Talk a little bit about that. Do you think that that's true?
Oh, yeah, 100%. So I've been leading worship since I was in like 5th, 6th, 7th grade. And so I felt like people had this expectation of me to not struggle. I don't know if that's true, but I think that can be a little like superhero. What's that called? Jenna Barbosa told me this. It was called Superman complex. Yeah. Where I thought I should be Superman. And because I thought I should be Superman, other people did too. And so I think, wait, what was the question? Hold on. I was going somewhere with this.
Is anxiety I-focused?
Oh, it's I-focused because you think everybody's looking at you the way that you look at you. You think that the way you're critical of yourself, other people are going to be critical of you. Even though I'm not that critical to other people, I think that they're going to be as critical as I am to myself about me. And so leading worship at conferences, I was like, if I let people know that I'm struggling, then how in the world am I going to be able to continue ministry? Because they're going to be critical of me. They're not going to want me here. I literally, Christy, I kid you not, I was at Centerpoint because I had told my parents I was at college, and I was like, hey, I don't want to be alive anymore. I need you to drive up here right now and get me.
Wow.
I went to Centerpoint. I got a psych eval. I didn't want to go because it was co-ed. I just had so many bad experiences in the dorms, being scared, and they were like, you can go home. I went home and led worship for a youth event. I literally cut my hospital band off in the car and went home and led worship for a youth event. And 2 friends of mine knew, and I walked up on stage. I was like, how you doing? I'm okay. I mean, it's been a rough week. Wanted to kill myself this morning, but like, it's this, I am responsible for being God in my own life kind of thing. And if I can prove to God that I am Superwoman, that kind of like perfectionistic thing, then no one can be upset with me and I can't fail,
One of the lines in the book is that I had to untie my Superwoman cape and lay it at the feet of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I think that there are so many people just like you, Faith, that think they are all that in a bag of chips, and that they have to be all that in a bag of chips. It's a twofold thing. Like, I can do it. I don't need it. And we don't realize that surrender is truly a strength. We think it's a weakness. We think that if we say, okay, God, I give up, it's all you now, you take over, you take control, that we're losing this power. But truly, that's where power comes in. That's when power is represented in the life of a Christian in a way that, like, we don't, it doesn't even make sense to us. Yeah. So learning that surrender is just truly the biggest thing that you could do is so important, I think.
Yeah. And realizing that we never had the cape in the first place is like one of the things that came to me is like, anxiety is the illusion that we had control in the first place, And I think for me, anytime I like lost control, I realized I never had it in the first place. And so like God's always had the Superwoman cape, the Superman cape. Yeah, God's not a woman, but he had the cape in the first place, and he was just carrying us when he was flying. Like he was carrying us through everything. And at some point, I thought that was me, that I had the cape, and that was never true. And so I think that's a really dangerous place to be, because I know I'm using like a lot of like, I don't know, vague things, but I never knew how to fly. Like we're not capable as humans to do godlike things, Superman-like things. God is. And so when he allows us to be on a stage and allows us to lead worship and speak to people, that's not in our own strength. That's not because we did enough good things or we were worthy enough of that calling. It's because God said, you're a broken person who loves me. I'm going to allow you to be broken and lead others towards me in their brokenness. And so, yeah.
So Faith, the day you came to me, anxiety out of your mind, hadn't eaten in
2 months.
I mean,
I hadn't eaten in 6 weeks.
Like every time you ate, it would throw back up. And it wasn't because of an eating disorder. It was literally because of anxiety. Yeah. There is someone listening to this that is in the hell that you have just come through
like 2 weeks ago. Like, I mean, I still like on vacation was struggling to keep food down when I was anxious. So don't feel like, I want to preface this as I am still figuring out how when I get anxious to keep food down. So continue, but I do want to put that out there.
Yeah. Tell me.
I'm here right now.
Tell me why you're here right now.
I'm here right now. Like,
tell me
how I got to this point.
Yes.
I think allowing myself the grace of, I had struggled with health issues. And so food is fuel. You have to heal your body. And I was just telling you about how I'm going back to trying to eat healthy. But in this time, there were 2 things that I could keep down. And it was Sonic, Dr. Pepper, and French fries.
Okay.
And as a perfectionist, I'm like, but I'm not eating healthy. I'm not feeling my body, which is true. I wasn't eating healthy and I wasn't feeling my body, but those calories were better than nothing. So give yourself grace. What sounds good right now? What sounds like a safe food? Eat it. It's okay. It's okay. And it's okay. Like, just tell yourself that is your goal. Just keep it down. And as I'm getting on the other side of this, I'm reevaluating, okay, how do I now take that Sonic Dr. Pepper and replace it with water? In baby steps. Me and my mom sat down yesterday and said, what can be my win this week? And I said, drinking a water when I would have had a Dr. Pepper.
There you go.
And Dr. Pepper does not help with anxiety either. It was caffeine, but it was what I could keep down. It was calories. do the little things are wins. Like,
Take a shower.
There
you go.
That was still a hard one for me. Showers are overwhelming. Sorry if you've hugged me recently. No, yeah. If you like showers, take a shower.
Take a walk. We've talked.
Ooh, take a walk is a good one. And that's something your friends can do. My friends would come over and walk with me. They would literally come over, get me out of bed. And this is way above and beyond what friends need to do. But they would pick me up out of my bed, say, let's go, grab a Dr. Pepper out of the fridge. And we would walk up and down my neighborhood until I was so tired that I couldn't be anxious. And we would do laps. We would go all the way up to my neighbor's house that has cows. I live in a neighborhood, so we had to walk a good amount. We'd walk all the way up there. They have cows, chickens, and we would sit with the cows and chickens until I had enough energy to walk back. And so little things like that walking, I probably got like 500 steps in a day because I was getting off the bathroom floor. But I got a 2,000 step in walk, which was huge. That was a win for me. Drinking a Dr. Pepper and keeping it down was a win for me. Don't think that the bare minimum isn't a win, because when you have anxiety, the bare minimum almost feels unreachable. You know?
That's very good advice. Very good advice. All right, so we're getting ready to land the ship here. So why do you think that Nervous Breakthrough is so important to be in our world right now?
I think it's the first book that asks for more reflection than just like absorption, because we live in such a world that you could go find an anxiety podcast anywhere. And they're wonderful and they're great resources. But it's the first resource that I found that said, okay, so why do you think you're Superwoman? Instead of saying like, I thought I was Superman. It took a step farther and said, why do you think you're Superwoman? And I had to sit back, and I went upstairs crying to my mom. I was like, I think I'm Superwoman. She just started laughing. She goes, I've been telling you that for years. It's the first book that makes you like internally reflect on everything and not just take other people's experiences and leave them there. It goes, okay, why is this? How can I use this to change my view on life, my fear, my anxiety? And it's also vulnerable. It talked about how you were on a sunny beach and not even in a super stressful situation, and you had a breakdown. And for me, that's where my first like huge anxiety attack came, was a 7-day vacation on the beach, and I didn't leave the bathroom. And just that vulnerability is super cool. And it's not just a how-to book. It's not if you do these seven steps, you'll get better. It's a daily walk. It's a daily fight. Going off antidepressants is hard. There's all kinds of things in there that are just beautiful, vulnerable. But then it doesn't leave it at your vulnerability. It asks the reader to be vulnerable as well, which is where like life change happened for me.
Thank you, Faith. As we close out, is there anything in particular that we didn't get to say or that you'd like to say to somebody on the other side of this microphone?
If you're listening and you're the support system with somebody with anxiety, just go tell them you love them. Just go tell them you love them, because I think they would want to hear it. I don't think I could be told enough, because it's so, like when you think that you are your struggle, go remind them that they're not their struggle and that they have a struggle.
Amen. Faith, I saw your eyes glass over a few times. And here's the thing. It's because this matters to our heart. We are very passionate about being vulnerable with our struggles, but also letting people know that there is hope on the other side. So it would mean so much to me if you would just pray us out and pray for whatever you feel like God's calling you to pray for.
Yeah, I would love to. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you. Thank you for being good. And thank you for being good when life is bad. Yes. And thank you for being a God who isn't scared of our fear and scared of our anxiety and promises an eternity without it. God, I pray for whoever's watching right now, that if they are feeling worthless, that you remind them that you created them with a purpose, that you created them with worth, and that they are not defined by their struggles. I pray that you give them peace beyond all understanding right now. I pray that as we walk forward and this gets listened to, that conversations are had that isn't just absorbed, but it's internalized, God, and that they can take this vulnerability and share it with those around them, and that those who they share it with take it with such love and grace, God, and they treat it as if it truly is glass, and it's so valuable, but so fragile. So God, I just pray for every single person listening that they experience your peace and your grace, and that those around them will be an extension of that. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Faith.
If you found this to be helpful, you can find out so much more in my book, Nervous Breakthrough. And guess what? Right now, you can order it on Amazon. Also, can you do something for me? Will you help us get the word out about this podcast? I would be so honored if you would share it with your loved ones, rate it, review it, and also be sure to subscribe. And lastly, and I really mean this, we want to hear from you. If you have suggestions or ideas on something that I should cover or a tip that you'd really like help on, please send us an email, podcast@fearlessunite.com. Again, that's podcast@fearlessunite.com. Thank you so much for listening.